So imagine a catastrophe, like just the complete end of civilization.
Oh, wow. We're starting light today.
Hey, we have to set the stage right. So the intricate modern world we live in is just, well, it's finished. Maybe it was a massive solar flare or, I don't know, a total collapse of the global power grid.
Right, so the ultimate blank slate, which is terrifying.
Extremely terrifying because you are one of the few survivors standing in the wreckage of modernity. You have no phone, you have no
Oh,
electricity,
internet.
no fuel, nothing. Surrounded by all that silence, where do you even start? Like, what is the single piece of technology you need to keep yourself and basically the embers of human civilization alive?
This is a great thought experiment.
Yeah, the science historian James Burke posed this exact scenario. And his answer wasn't, a complex piece of machinery or a generator or even a weapon. His answer was a plow.
A plow.
Hmm.
Which, I mean, makes total sense when you think about it. And that perfectly sets up the mission for today's deep dive. Today, we are exploring the introduction and some of the most fascinating stories from the book 50 Inventions That Shaped the Modern Economy by Tim Harford.
Yeah, and Harford is, well, he's an award-winning journalist, a senior columnist at the Financial Times, and he wrote The Undercover Economist and Messy. He just has this incredible talent for looking at the unseen architecture of the world.
Exactly. And when you read through his introduction, you realize pretty quickly this is absolutely not a standard countdown of like obvious technological triumphs.
Right, so no Wright brothers or Apollo missions here.
No, not at all, because Harford is looking at the economic butterfly effect. He takes seemingly mundane objects, things you might not even realize are technologies, and shows how they completely rewired the human species.
Yeah, I love that approach, like how they create massive industries or obliterate old ways of life and just shift the balance of global power.
Right. Because a new technology doesn't just change what we can do, it changes the economic incentives of society. It alters supply chains, legal frameworks, all of that.
So let's jump right in. Let's start right where that survival scenario left us. The ultimate original technology, the plow.
Yeah, the plow. So 12,000 years ago, humans were nomadic foragers, right?
Right.
But the climate was shifting, things were getting hotter, and people began to realize that instead of constantly moving to find food, they could just cultivate local plants.
But the problem there is the soil. Because if you just drop seeds on hard, undisturbed earth, weeds choke them out, and the roots can't penetrate.
Exactly. So early farmers tried using like sharp sticks to poke holes, but it was just incredibly inefficient. So the real game changer was a simple wooden scratching plow pulled by a pair of domesticated cows.
Right, because by dragging this wedge through the earth, you physically turn the soil over.
Yeah, and that mechanism buries the weeds, which effectively kills them, while bringing nutrient-rich soil right up to the surface.
And the math behind that simple mechanism, that's what builds the modern world. Because once you have animal-drawn plows, a single farmer becomes, what, 5 or 6 times more productive than a forager?
Easily. Suddenly, 1/5 of the population can grow enough food to sustain the entire community.
Which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
That leaves the other 4/5 of the population with a surplus of time.
Right. They are emancipated from the daily grind of survival, and that is the human capital that builds civilization. Those people become specialized.
Yeah, they learn metallurgy, they bake bricks.
They engineer aqueducts, build cities, all of it.
But, and Harford points this out, once you have cities and specialists trading goods, you hit an administrative wall pretty fast. Because a society can't manage thousands of grain shipments and tax collections just relying on human memory alone.
No, you need an accounting system.
Right. And we tend to romanticize the invention of writing as this, noble pursuit for poetry and philosophy.
Yeah.
But if you look at the earliest cuneiform tablets, they aren't epics.
No, they're spreadsheets.
Exactly. They're just records of barley, sheep, and beer.
Yeah, writing was basically invented as an economic coordination tool. But obviously, a tool needs a medium. And for a long time, writing was carved into clay or inscribed on parchment.
Which is basically animal skin, right?
Yeah, exactly. Producing a single book required slaughtering an entire flock of sheep. It was prohibitively expensive, which meant information was strictly locked away by the elite.
Which brings us to paper, because I feel like the printing press usually gets all the historical glory here.
Oh, absolutely. Johannes Gutenberg unveils his press in the 1440s, and we treat it like the birth of the information age.
Right. But Harford points out that if Gutenberg had tried to print his Bibles entirely on parchment, it would have been commercial suicide.
Yeah, because the printing press is totally useless without a medium that can take ink quickly and, more importantly, can be manufactured for pennies.
Wait, so is paper amazing specifically because it's essentially cheap garbage?
Basically, yeah. Paper, which was made from mashed rags and plant fibers, arrived in Germany just before Gutenberg built his press. It's thin, flexible, and chemically stable enough to hold an impression. But its true technological breakthrough was its cost. It was cheap.
So its value is literally in its disposability. Because it's high-grade garbage, you can use it to wrap fish or, print a daily newspaper that becomes worthless by tomorrow morning.
Or use it for hygiene. If paper were precious, the mass dissemination of information just couldn't happen. By making the medium disposable, human knowledge became abundant.
That makes a lot of sense. So as economies scaled up through writing and trade, physical inventions like plows and paper were no longer enough to handle the complexity.
Right. Society had to start inventing abstract concepts. Lawmakers had to engineer legal technologies.
Yeah, and that leads to one of my favorite parts of the book, the limited liability company, the LLC.
It's strange to think of a corporate structure as an invention, isn't it?
It really is. But Nicholas Murray Butler, he was the former president of Columbia University, he called the Limited Liability Corporation the greatest single discovery of modern times, even more critical than steam or electricity.
Wow. But when you look at how business worked before the LLC, you understand why. Because doing business was incredibly dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. If you partnered with someone to build a merchant ship and that ship sank in a storm, your creditors wouldn't just take your investment.
No, they could take your personal house, your land, your entire livelihood. You were personally liable for the failure.
Right, so that massive risk terrified people away from funding large-scale projects like railways or factories.
So lawmakers engineered a legal firewall. And I love that the word incorporate literally means to take on bodily form. Lawmakers invented a phantom person.
A phantom person, right? The corporation became a separate legal entity that could own assets, borrow money, and get sued.
Exactly. So if the company goes bankrupt, the company dies, but the investors only lose the money they put in. Their personal homes are safe.
It's an imaginary entity that essentially crowdsources risk, unlocking massive pools of capital that built the Industrial Revolution. But capital needs to be deployed safely, and it also needs to move securely across great distances.
Which was a massive challenge.
Yeah. And the challenge of moving wealth geographically leads us to one of the most fascinating financial inventions in history. And it was engineered by a group you wouldn't normally associate with banking, the Knights Templar.
The Templars, yeah, a holy order of heavily armed warrior monks.
Exactly. In the 12th century, their headquarters at Temple Church in London became the city's first true bank. But they didn't just store gold in a vault. They invented a network of international tradable debt.
So imagine a merchant traveling from London to Jerusalem. Carrying chests of gold across Europe was basically an invitation to be robbed or killed.
Oh, for sure. So the Templars solved this with an information network. The merchant would deposit their gold at the London Temple, and in exchange, they received a ciphered letter of credit.
Right. And then they could travel empty-handed to Jerusalem, present the letter to the local Templar outpost, and just withdraw the equivalent funds.
They completely decoupled wealth from physical metal. By turning personal deposits into internationally recognized debt instruments, the Templars created a private currency system entirely outside the jurisdiction of European kings.
And sovereign nations despise financial systems they cannot control.
Oh yeah. King Philip IV of France had borrowed heavily from the Templars to fund his wars, and he was deeply in debt. So in 1307, he just orchestrated a massive sudden raid.
Yeah, he had the Templars arrested, tortured them into confessing to heresy, and burned their last grandmaster, Jacques de Molay, at the stake.
Brutal. Through sheer brutal force, Philip just wiped his ledger clean.
It really shows what happens when borderless finance collides with territorial governments. And, that friction hasn't disappeared.
Not at all. Modern international banks operate on the exact same premise as the Templars. They use complex, multinational webs to move wealth where sovereign governments can't easily tax it.
Harvard gives a great breakdown of how corporate profit shifting works today. Multinational companies use internal accounting mechanisms to move their profits to countries with very low corporate tax rates, like Bermuda or Trinidad.
Right. While showing zero profit in the countries where they actually design and sell their products, you're probably wondering right now, how do they legally do that?
Yeah, it sounds like magic.
It's like playing a game of Monopoly, where you own properties on two different tables. You collect all your rent on table A, but before you have to pay taxes on it, you secretly sell yourself a piece of worthless cardboard from table B for all the cash you just made.
I love that analogy.
Right. Now, Table A looks broke, and Table B has all the money sitting in a tax-free zone.
Hmm.
In the real world, a parent company might have a subsidiary in Trinidad sell a completely standard ballpoint pen to its European branch for $8,500.
Which is an accounting fiction known as transfer pricing. The European branch now registers a massive loss because it spent so much on a pen, while the Trinidad branch registers a massive profit.
And according to economist Gabriel Zuckman, roughly 55% of U.S.-based companies' profits are routed through jurisdictions like this. That costs the U.S. government around $130 billion every year.
Wow. So the abstract invention of offshore banking solves the problem of capital efficiency for the corporation, but creates a massive shortfall for the public.
Exactly. And that tension between public funding and private wealth is a recurring theme. The stories we tell ourselves about how physical, modern tech wonders actually come into existence are often just skewed.
We really love the myth of the lone genius working in a garage.
We do. Let's look at the iPhone, January 9, 2007. Steve Jobs gets on stage and unveils a device that completely reshapes human communication. And the narrative is always that Apple invented the future out of thin air.
But surely this is just a case of a lone genius creating something out of thin air in Silicon Valley, right? I mean, Jobs was undeniably a genius. Look at his work with Pixar on Toy Story.
He was a visionary in design and user experience, no doubt. But if you strip away the sleek casing of an iPhone and look at the core technologies inside, the narrative shifts.
Oh, so?
The foundational components, the internet, the touchscreen, GPS, and the fast Fourier transform, none of those were dreamed up by a private corporation.
Okay, let's pause on the fast Fourier transform, because that sounds really intimidating. What exactly is that doing in my phone?
So when you speak into your phone, your voice creates messy, continuous sound waves. The fast Fourier transform is a highly complex mathematical algorithm that instantly chops those waves into discrete, compressed digital frequencies so they can be transmitted over cellular networks.
Okay, it's the math that makes wireless communication possible.
Exactly.
And Apple didn't invent that math.
No. That algorithm, along with the internet itself, was heavily funded and developed by government entities like DARPA and the U.S. military. Touchscreens were pioneered by researchers at CERN and the CIA.
Wow, so the public sector absorbed the massive financial risks of this fundamental early-stage research.
Yes. Private companies like Apple brilliantly synthesized and commercialized those public investments. But without those publicly funded mechanisms, the iPhone would have just been an elegant plastic brick.
That's wild. You know, while the iPhone is a hyper-visible status symbol, some of our most impactful inventions are entirely hidden in plain sight. Take the elevator.
The elevator, which Arford argues is arguably the most successful piece of green technology in human history.
It really is. It fundamentally changed urban economics by making the upper floors of a building the most desirable and expensive, whereas previously, no one wanted to walk up 6 flights of stairs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It allowed cities to build vertically, packing millions of people into tight geographic areas.
And density is incredibly energy efficient. Harvard contrasts the Empire State Building with the headquarters of the Rocky Mountain Institute. The RMI is an environmental organization, and their building is, well, it's a marvel of eco-design.
Right, it has krypton-filled, triple-glazed windows and ultra-efficient insulation.
Sounds perfect, right? But there's a structural flaw. The RMI headquarters was built high in the Colorado Mountains, far away from public infrastructure.
Right, so to get to this hyper-efficient building, employees have to drive miles in personal vehicles or take specialized transit.
Exactly. The carbon emitted just commuting to the building offsets the efficiency of the windows. Meanwhile, the Empire State Building sits directly on top of a subway line. People walk out of a train and step into an elevator.
And furthermore, modern elevators are engineered to conserve energy. Many are equipped with regenerative braking.
Wait, really? How does that work?
So when an elevator car full of heavy passengers goes down, gravity's doing the pulling, right? The elevator's motor actually runs in reverse, acting as a generator. The braking mechanism takes the kinetic energy of the descending car and feeds electricity back into the building's internal grid.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. The humble elevator quietly moves billions of people with ruthless environmental efficiency simply by exploiting vertical density.
That is amazing. You know, these sprawling systems of technology and infrastructure are brilliant, but they are ultimately managed by, well, unpredictable human beings.
Yeah.
Economic innovation isn't always a machine or an algorithm. Sometimes it's a shift in human psychology.
The evolution of retail is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. In the late 19th century, Shopping in Europe was a rigid, almost hostile experience. The prevailing business model was bespoke service.
Right, you didn't just wander into a store to browse. You went in, sat down, and a clerk would bring out specific items you requested. If you didn't buy anything, you were basically wasting their time.
And Harford tells this great story about Harry Gordon Selfridge. He was an American retail manager who worked for Marshall Field in Chicago. And Marshall Field had just started pushing this revolutionary concept that the customer is always right.
Right. So in 1888, Selfridge travels to London to scout the competition. He walks into a high-end shop and simply looks around. When he tells the clerk he's just browsing, the clerk snaps at him, "Then op it, mate."
Which basically means, get out of my store.
Exactly. Selfridge realized this was an economic failure. By forcing a high-pressure commitment the moment someone walked in the door, stores were artificially limiting their customer base.
Yeah, so Selfridge later opened his own department store in London, bringing the American model with him. He put goods out on open display. He encouraged people to touch things, to wander, to experience the store as a leisure activity without any obligation to buy.
Which is how we shop today. By lowering the psychological barrier to entry, he triggered the mechanism of impulse buying. He democratized the luxury experience and completely reshaped consumer culture.
But the human element in innovation isn't always harmless, is it? Sometimes economic incentives drive people to make terrifying compromises.
No, it's not. Thomas Midgley is a prime example of this. In the 1920s, the automotive industry was facing a mechanical crisis known as engine knocking. Engines were vibrating violently and losing power because the fuel was igniting too early in the combustion chamber.
So they needed an additive to slow down the fuel burn. Now, ethanol worked perfectly well to stop the knocking. But there's a problem with ethanol from a corporate perspective, right?
Yeah, you can't patent it. Anyone can make it. General Motors and Standard Oil needed a proprietary solution they could own and license.
So Midgley discovered that adding tetraethyl lead to gasoline solved the knocking problem beautifully. The patent was secured, and the financial upside was astronomical.
The only issue, of course, was that lead is highly toxic, causing severe neurological damage.
Right. Factory workers producing the additive started hallucinating and dying. The press started asking aggressive questions.
So what did Midgley do?
Well, Midgley, fully aware of the lethal nature of the chemical, called a press conference. He theatrically poured a container of tetraethyl lead over his hands, rubbed it into his skin, and inhaled the fumes for a full minute.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He looked at the reporters and declared he could do it every single day without any health risks.
But he spent the next several months secretly recovering from severe lead poisoning.
Exactly. It was a calculated theatrical deception designed to protect a highly profitable patent. It took decades of public health battles to finally get lead out of gasoline, long after the neurotoxic effects had spread globally.
It's a stark reminder that the financial success of an invention doesn't mean it's good for us. And sometimes, a brilliant invention ruins its creator before it changes the world. Look at Rudolf Diesel.
Right, what happened to the man whose name is literally on millions of engines today?
Well, it's a tragedy. Diesel was a brilliant engineer who realized that traditional steam engines were shockingly inefficient, wasting almost 90% of their fuel energy. So he designed an internal combustion engine based on compression ignition.
Okay, so instead of using a spark plug to ignite the fuel, his engine squeezed air inside a cylinder until the pressure generated so much heat that the fuel ignited spontaneously.
Yes. The thermodynamic efficiency of that mechanism was revolutionary. It could extract vastly more power from fuel, but early on it was a commercial disaster.
Why is that?
Because generating that kind of extreme pressure required heavy, thick iron walls. The early engines were monstrously huge and incredibly dangerous, prone to exploding under the immense pressure. They were completely impractical for the automobiles of the era.
Oh, wow. So he was stuck.
Yeah, Diesel sunk everything he had into the company, but the commercial delays crippled him. By 1913, he was drowning in debt. In late September, he boarded the passenger ship SS Dresden to cross the English Channel.
Yeah.
He had dinner, went to his cabin, marked an X in his diary, and neatly laid out his nightclothes on the bed. Then he walked out onto the deck in the middle of the night and vanished. He jumped into the freezing water.
That is heartbreaking.
He died believing he was a failure. He never lived to see metallurgy improve to the point where his engine could be made small and safe enough to power the world's ships, trucks, and trains, completely transforming global logistics.
That's just wild. These technologies, from the physical weight of a diesel engine to the abstract mechanics of an LLC, they cast incredibly long shadows. They shift the ground beneath our feet.
But despite the tragedies and the unintended consequences, Hartford is careful to highlight the profound, almost unimaginable progress we've achieved. The epilogue of the book focuses on a beautiful metric for human progress: the price of light.
Yeah, the economist William Nordhaus conducted a study looking not at standard inflation, but at how many hours an average person had to work to buy a specific amount of light. 1,000 lumen hours, to be exact.
Right, for thousands of years, man-made light was a luxury. If you lived in ancient Babylon, you had to work for weeks to afford enough sesame oil to burn a lamp for a few hours.
Even in the 1800s, candles were expensive enough that you only used them when absolutely necessary.
But Nordhaus calculated that since the invention of the modern light bulb, the cost of light has plummeted by a staggering factor of 500,000. It is 500,000 times cheaper.
That is unbelievable. The mechanism of mass electrification took something precious and made it virtually free. It's so cheap now that we leave rooms and forget to turn off the switch. Our cities glow so brightly they can be seen from space. It is a measurable, undeniable miracle of human ingenuity.
It really is. But as Hartford's book demonstrates over and over, every time human ingenuity solves a problem, it alters the landscape, often creating a completely new set of complexities.
Yeah, the solutions of today always plant the seeds of tomorrow's problems. And that is the thought we want to leave you with today.
Exactly.
At the beginning of this deep dive, we talked about how the plow birthed civilization. But the hidden catch was that it also locked humanity into thousands of years of grueling agricultural labor, bad diets, and rigid class hierarchies. The technology created a trap that society couldn't easily escape.
So true.
So think about the tools in your life right now. Look around your room, your car, or the device you're using to listen to this. Which of the hyper-convenient inventions that you rely on every single day is silently locking our society into a massive, unseen trap?
What is the mundane object that historians 100 years from now will write about, wondering how we couldn't see the catch?
Keep questioning the ordinary things around you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.